Hi, this is Abul Hussain coming to you direct from London, the United Kingdom, and welcome to another episode of the SMMA Mastermind Podcast, where we talk about how you can start or scale your digital marketing, your social media marketing, your Facebook marketing agency. And today I have a guest joining me all the way from Vancouver in Canada. His name is Evan Gilbert, and he is the founder of Blocky Media. So Evan, welcome to the show.
Happy to be on, Abul. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you very much for joining me, because it must be quite early for you in Vancouver. It's just
9:30 in the morning. It's more than fine. Office hours don't start till 10 a.m. So it's all good right here.
Brilliant. So for those of the viewers who don't know who you are, why don't you give a bit of a background into I suppose who you are, how you got started with your agency, and the journey to this point.
Yeah, for sure. So I pretty much I guess I'll start where I went to school and stuff. So I ended up going to school for broadcasting, and it was mainly focused in radio broadcasting. I have a background in acting, so I was used to doing principal acting work, so on camera, also theater acting as well. And one of the reasons why I wanted to join up in radio broadcasting was that I got to write my own script. And there's nothing more scary than just pretty much being on air for about a minute or so, trying to create an interesting story for 60 to 90 seconds and being able to time out to the second for top of hour, half of the hour, and all that sort of stuff. So it really honed in on my script writing, copywriting, all that sort of stuff that I never really knew that I was going to need later on in life. So ended up doing broadcasting at the British Columbia Institute of Technology. And then I ended up getting a job with one of Canada's largest media companies. I ended up doing social media and promotions with the company out in Vancouver, which I was very fortunate to do. But then I realized after around 6-7 months that getting paid pretty much minimum wage to do blog writing, social media content, pretty much some paid traffic, and there was a whole bunch of other stuff that was all going on. And I was just I took a step back and I realized, wait a minute, should I be getting paid more to be doing this sort of stuff? So that's when I realized after 6-7 months of working there that I needed to kind of figure this stuff out on my own. Then I started doing social media freelancing work after working corporate for 6-7 months. And that was also a whole other adventure on its own, doing freelance work. As we all know, for those that do freelancing, it gets really hectic at times, and you try to be a yes man all the time. So you just say yes to every single project that comes through. So I ended up doing, I think I was doing social media management, paid traffic, content creation, all that sort of stuff. I managed to get 4 clients in 48 hours. So 4 clients in 2 days, which was pretty crazy at the time. But then I didn't realize that I would have to actually do all these different things in all these different niches. And it pretty much drove me nuts. Then I kind of took a step back and I was like, okay, I don't think that I left this job so that I wouldn't have to do all this sort of stuff all over again for my own personal life. There must be something missing here. And that's when I ended up finding a mentor of mine who's actually out in London. His name is Iman Gaji. And that's when I started learning about the agency life, building out an agency, your own online digital agency. And that's when I got into social media marketing and building out my own agency. So I got fully incorporated in August of 2018. So it's officially been 2 years since I've incorporated my business. And I mainly do strictly focusing on, with myself and my team, just doing paid traffic, mainly with real estate professionals. So either PREC, so that's personal real estate corporations, as well as brokerages and individual realtors. And I also work with info products, e-com, and fitness as well. But but mainly for about 1.5 years, I pretty much solely worked on real estate lead generation campaigns. And that's kind of how I got my start until COVID hit. And the government pretty much shut down 95% of my business in the span of 72 hours. And then that's when I was like, holy crap, I gotta kind of switch things up a little bit, go into different niches, and not just solely depend on the majority of my business from one niche. So now I used to be around 90-95% of my clients before COVID used to just be in real estate. Now it's roughly around 60% or so. So I try to diversify as much as possible. But yeah, that's kind of a short condensed story of the last probably 4 or 5 years of my life.
No, that's awesome. And there's quite a few follow-up questions I have from that. So let's start with getting 4 clients in 48 hours. People can't get one client in 48 days. How did that happen?
Oh, it was a lot of like it was a lot of referrals from like mutual friends and stuff like that, because a lot of people are just kind of scared to ask for like favors and all that sort of stuff from people, and people are also very scared to pick up the phone. And that's one of the things that I really preach about, is to use your own network first and see who's running businesses and who needs help and who's running their own social media channels. Because like, in all honesty, like if you're running a business, like social media is just like an extra hassle for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And pretty much like, I just kind of, you just have to frame it where you're easing up time for the individual to make more sales, on whoever's running the business to make more sales themselves. And you can either focus on management, content creation, or paid traffic as well. So yeah, it was a lot of just like my referral networks. I didn't have to do really any cold outreach. It was all warm and hot outreach that I ended up doing. The warm was mostly through mutual friends that I would get connections through. But also had 2 of those clients ended up actually being like actual friends of mine that I've known for years and stuff. So yeah, that's one of the things, like the difference between cold and warm and hot outreach, is that you don't have to sell yourself as much when you're using your own mutual connections.
Mm-hmm. I suppose that's a good way to get started. And you're right, a lot of people are slightly afraid to ask for friends and family for a bit of help. So now that because you're starting your business, I'm sure they were quite aware that you're just getting started. Did they try to negotiate you down? I mean, did they try to put you on a very kind of a low retainer, or did you get what you wanted right off the bat?
Some of it was like, oh, I'll just kind of like do these things. Like I think I like one of them just kind of combated with price at the time, but other than that, though, I pretty much like priced the services very low. So I was only doing like $500 a month or something like that per client, because like I didn't really know what the prices were, what the going rate was, and I was just kind of winging it at the time, because that's what you do sometimes as a freelancer. You just have to wing it until you kind of figure it out for yourself, and then you can actually know what your value is. And looking back on that, like that's how a lot of people get started with our industry and building out an agency and all that sort of stuff, was to find the nitty gritty and go out there and get paid like crap and have a few crappy clients. Because always the cheapest clients that you have throughout, like this is both my personal opinion, as well as hearing about it from other agency owners, is that whenever you have your cheapest client will always demand the most from you every single time. So yeah, it's just very interesting to go through that. Everyone should have to go through that every so often. Everyone should have to go through a couple nightmare clients that don't actually respect your time or anything along those lines, or don't respect what you have to offer, so that you know to say no to those people in the future, in a sense. So yeah, I didn't really have to like negotiate a whole lot with like 3 out of the 4 of them.
Yeah.
One of them I did, but at the end of the day, it was just like it was just like 2 months of freelancing contract. So I knew it was going to be up in 2 months, so I wouldn't have to work with these people for much longer.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So the niche you're in right now, your primary niche, real estate, how did you come into that? Because I've spoken to a lot of people and they're like, oh, real estate, tough niche, can't sign a client, too demanding. Everyone's talking about Zillow and all these other sites. How did you fall into this competitive niche?
For a couple of reasons. First one was my upbringing. So I was really into just housing and real estate at a very young age. When I was like 10, 11 years old, like I was watching House Hunters International, House Hunters. I've always loved traveling as well, and I've always been interested in purchasing property, all that sort of stuff. And I spoke a very common language with a lot of people that are in the real estate industry, and I have a few few friends that are already in the real estate industry as well. So I kind of know how they act, what they go about in their day, what their interests were, and what their pain points were, essentially, since I hung out with these people for years and they ended up going into real estate. So yeah, that's a couple of reasons for why I chose real estate. One of the other reasons why I chose real estate, mainly for like lead generation and stuff, is that like got pretty good at it. My first couple campaigns. So it was just much easier to be able to much easier to scale with it as well in the future. So pretty much like that kind of covers it right there. So it was as a kid, 11 years old, really into all this like property investment, all that sort of stuff. And then I just kind of merged high income scale in order to help these people out and get more leads to convert them into sales and whatnot. So yeah, that's pretty much how I got into real estate. The other one that was on the top of my head, I'm also from Vancouver in Canada, and Vancouver is I believe the third most expensive city in North America after San Francisco and New York City. And in Canada, Vancouver is the most expensive city Vancouver is the most expensive city in Canada. So I was very interested in the real estate market, and our real estate market here in the province that I'm in British Columbia, is actually, there's more, as a percentage of GDP in Canada, there's actually more economic activity in real estate, purchasing property and selling property than there is in the oil and gas sector in the prairies in Canada, which used to be kind of the lifeblood of the Canadian economy and resources and physical commodities. But now it's completely shifted to real estate. I think real estate has gone up by 2 or 3% higher as a percentage of GDP versus actual physical commodities like oil and mining and all that sort of stuff. So it was just kind of like, we're surrounded by real estate all the time. Vancouver has the most expensive real estate in Canada as well, compared to Toronto. Vancouver and Toronto, both extremely expensive cities to live in. So that's also why I kind of got drawn to it as well, was because of how I grew up and just being around a lot of different real estate kind of like the growth of real estate and seeing how much it's actually grown since I was a kid. So I'm 27. So since I was a kid during the 90s, seeing how much property prices have grown drastically in the last 20 years or so has been really, really interesting and stuff. So yeah, I just kind of found it fascinating. So that's why I chose it as a niche, when most people would choose real estate as a niche because people think it's easy or it's the go-to niche and all that sort of stuff. But they haven't really looked into real estate and they don't speak the same language as a lot of realtors do. So yeah.
No, that's quite interesting that you mentioned speaking the language of the niche obviously helps quite a lot, especially when people are talking about Facebook and SEO and all of these other bells and whistles that realtors are not used to. You know, they want someone who speaks in their language, not you trying to teach them yours. And right now with realtors, are you picking them up through referrals, or are you doing any cold prospecting? I know there's been a bit of a downturn with COVID-19 all across the world. How does prospecting look like for you right now?
So I used to do a lot of outreach right when I was starting out with my agency. And how I would do outreach is through cold messaging on LinkedIn, Facebook, email, and include that in cold calling as well. So there'd be at least 4 or 5 different touch points that both myself and my team would have with a specific prospect. So I would message them on a whole bunch of different platforms, or my team would message them on a whole bunch of different platforms. So you pretty much you can't escape kind of thing a little bit, just to kind of put it bluntly. But yeah, it's pretty much just to get someone's attention, because sometimes people will see a message, then they forget about it, or they'll log on to something else and they'll forget about it. I think I read somewhere that our attention span now is like 6 seconds. For humans, and it's dropped drastically. I think a goldfish has around 7 or 8 seconds of an attention span, and humans have a lot less. That's what I really did when I was getting started, was doing a lot of outreach that way. But what I started to do, and what one of my mentors mentioned to me, was to start doing SEO growth on YouTube, and to start creating videos on YouTube so that you can start getting leads, say a year, 2 or 3 years down the line. Because the YouTube algorithm really favors things from like a year ago, 2 years ago, and it keeps them into the algorithm. So so I started doing a lot more YouTube videos back in around 2018, focused on real estate, and 2019. And right now I'm paying, now those dividends are paying off, because I haven't really done much specific real estate videos for 2020 on my YouTube page. But I'm still getting leads coming in the door from videos that I made back in 2019 and 2018. So that's how I'm able to get leads now for my agency, is through YouTube videos, through my Instagram as well. People that follow me on Instagram, and also through LinkedIn too. So if I post like an article or I just do a regular post on LinkedIn, I have people that will just ask me about my service and they're curious about it, and they'll end up booking meetings and in through that way. So I don't do as much outreach anymore because of like I've built out my social media profiles in a way where I don't have to necessarily do outreach anymore. So which is pretty nice.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's one of the hardest things to do right at the beginning, is to get over that hump of doing outreach and getting those first few clients and getting those case studies and then getting referrals from that client and all that sort of stuff. So that's always the hardest part, is always that first year. It's that make or break year. To try and get your footing in, and you know that like growth just doesn't happen like linearly. Like growth just happens either, like growth is like really weird. It's kind of like different waves going up and down. Sometimes like you're losing, and sometimes like, oh, it's coming up a little bit, but then you're going to lose even more. And then one day it'll just start to pick up exponentially, which I was really fortunate to do back in around December, January. So with my business. So yeah, that's pretty much, I think that covers that.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of your current setup, what does it look like in your agency? What are you focused on? What are you outsourcing? I mean, do you have permanent members of staff, or are you using like freelancers and VAs and all of that?
Yeah, so I'm using, I have about 3 different Facebook ads contractors that work with me currently. So I like to divvy up my clients into different tiers for my contractors. And those contractors that are with me, they've been with me now for probably around a year and a half or so. What I really like to do right at the beginning of, another thing that I learned right at the beginning when I started my business, was to actually split test contractors, especially like Facebook ads contractors, where if you start getting clients in the door, you start split testing contractors with different clients. And then you can scale up with certain contractors who do better than others. And then you can keep adding more clients to the ones that are succeeding more. And then you just have, you fulfill like contractual obligations with the contractor, all that sort of stuff, for those that aren't doing as well. So yeah, that's kind of the structure for that. I also have a VA. I used to have a couple cold callers as well that used to work with me. But I don't do much cold outreach anymore. So I haven't really had the need for any cold calling or anything along those lines. So pretty much like I have 3 members of my team that do Facebook ads, including myself. I also do some of the ad campaigns as well, either copy the content, or going in and doing targeting as well. But yeah, so 3 Facebook ad contractors, my virtual assistant, and yeah, that's pretty much it for my agency business. Sometimes it switches up like every couple months or so, really depending on the client intakes and how many people have come in the door and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, and like I don't have any in-house staff or anything like that yet. Haven't really felt the need to bring anyone in-house quite yet. But maybe that'll change in the next 6 months or a year or something like that. But for right now, I strictly only work with contractors.
Awesome. And you've given a great tip in terms of split testing contractors, because one of the issues that I see popping up over and over again with people who are kind of doing a course and starting an agency is they can't deliver the service. So they don't come from a media buying background. And then they're like, oh, I've been burned by a contractor, or this contractor hasn't delivered results. So kind of having a couple on your Rolodex that you can kind of test against each other is a great strategy. Now, in terms of, I'm sure you've seen a lot of people try to get into the agency space who are like, marketing on LinkedIn, Facebook. I mean, we've all seen them. Why do you think most of them actually fail?
A lot of it's mindset. They have very, very wrong mindset and poor mindset. They go from, say, a job mentality and trying to start their own business from scratch, and they still have that same job mentality. So I think that's where the big struggle is. And it's not necessarily like our fault or that individual's fault for that. We've been indoctrinated from a very young age to go into a job lifestyle. Like we had 12 years of education from at a young age, starting in elementary school all the way up to high school, and all of that is just training to get a job. So a lot of it is just kind of, like it's a little bit of propaganda to go into becoming a job for 12 years, especially during our adolescence when our brains are at its most vulnerable to information. So it's not necessarily like people's fault why they fail with the agencies, fail building an agency. What a lot of people, I think, they get scared of is asking for help. And that's something that, and a lot of people are scared to fail too. And I think that's also taught to us, indoctrinated into us as well with our own school system too, where we're not really allowed to fail anymore. Like back in the 50s, like I remember like my parents telling me that kids like failed classes, and some kids wouldn't be able to graduate high school until they're like 24, 25 years old. Now everyone just kind of gets pushed along and stuff. So yeah, it's not necessarily like the individual's fault for failing with their agency. It's just that they have the wrong mindset and they just don't ask for help from people that have already built it out for themselves, because either they're scared of asking for help or they're scared of actually pursuing something that's much greater, and actually like dropping money down to actually like change their lifestyle, because that's like a huge mindset change for themselves when they hire either a coach or a mentor or something along those lines. It's a huge mindset change to kind of be like, yeah, I don't know anything. And it's very humbling, because people all love to like be know-it-alls and stuff and have as much information as possible. But not enough people are like Socrates in our society, I feel, and just ask questions and just be really curious. And I think it's very humbling for a lot of people. And I've seen a lot of my friends grow exponentially in this industry because they started asking a lot of questions and being incredibly humble to look for people that know a lot more than they are, than they do, and that are either 6 months ahead, a year ahead, or a couple of years ahead, and just asking for help. Even people that like make millions of dollars a year still ask for help from their own mentor, from their own mentorships and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, I think that's why some of the reasons why people just kind of fail in the beginning, because they try to do it on their own and they're just scared to ask for help, either because they have a lack of confidence in their own ability to make it further, or they're just stuck in that same mindset that they've had indoctrinated into them through 12 years of in quotations education. So yeah.
No, that makes total sense, because when you look at tactics and strategies, there's only so many different outreach strategies out there, right? And everyone is talking about it. So it's not like you're going to come across a magic pill or anything like that. So final question for you. You've been on this journey for just over 2 years. If you had to kind of start all over again, having learned what you have learned over the last 2 years, how do you go about building an agency from scratch?
Oh, wow. Probably one of the bigger things, I think, was just having more belief in service delivery and belief in the product and service that I was trying to sell. And I think that a lot of people just lack the confidence, and you can tell that on the phone, and you can tell that during meetings with prospects, that if you lack your own confidence in your service and your own abilities to help them create an ROI positive campaign, then why would they want to give you their credit card number, or why would they want to give you any money or anything along those lines if you don't have faith in what your product is or what your service is? So I think that the first thing is just being sold yourself on what you're doing, and having the confidence to be very proud of what you do. And if you're not really proud of what you're doing, like the service or the product, then redo it and rehash it out so that you have the confidence to be able to sell it and think that your product and service, you're going to be able to change lives with it. And change lives for the better, not for the worse. Change lives for the better. That was the big thing. It took me probably about 6 to 9 months or so to be comfortable enough to say like, oh yeah, like my service is absolutely bomb. It's awesome. So yeah, it's mostly just like I mentioned before, like why people quit. A lot of it is a mindset, and that was one of the things right at the beginning that I lacked, was the confidence in my own ability and my team's ability to actually deliver results when we were delivering results. But it was just weird at the time because I was still stuck in that old same mindset of oh, I don't know if this is going to work, or failure, all this sort of stuff, when really you should just kind of get over yourself and have that same confidence and be proud of what you're selling, and be proud of either your service or your product. So yeah, I think that's what I would tell myself about 2 years ago, is to just be like, nope, you're going to be doing the exact same thing 2 years from now. It's the exact same system. So just keep going at it and be more confident in your service delivery and be more confident with prospects so that they're more comfortable with you at the end of the day. So yeah.
That's an awesome piece of advice. And this is the first time I've heard someone talk about delivery. Usually people are talking about prospecting, but I'm glad you brought delivery up to it, because that's quite important in terms of retaining your clients. So on that note, Evan Gilbert, founder of Blocky Media, thank you very much for your time.
Abu, thank you so much for having me on. It was a pleasure.